about suspense films and mysteries. By the way, we've chosen Rear Window for our film for this week, and uh, Alfred Hitchcock was known as the master of suspense, and so many of his films are considered to be classics. Rear Window is the one that we happen to go with. It's one of my favorites, but there are so many great ones. Vertigo is considered to be a masterpiece, and Psycho and The Birds and Dial M for Murder, and just film after film after film, because Hitchcock was known for his ability to get people's hearts pumping and create a mystery. One of the things I think that was so interesting is that Alfred Hitchcock often used real life stories as motivation for his films, and he did that to use two stories for Rear Window. The first one is a case called by Patrick Mahone in 1924. In this Mahone character, was having an affair, got his mistress pregnant, and decided to execute her. And he then dismembered the body, chopped it up into bits, and he said that he threw it out. He brought it in a case and then would throw it out a train window to spread it out all over the place. And then I guess the head was too big to fit in his case, and so he burned it in his cellar, I think. And so that is part of the inspiration for Rear Window. The other one was a case called, or was Dr. Holly Harvard Crispin, and this was in 1910. And in this case, the doctor killed his wife because he had a younger mistress, and then he poisoned his wife and then cut her up, and then they moved to LA. He and his mistress moved to LA, and so there's a mistress moving. In fact, the way he was caught is that his young mistress was wearing his wife's old jewelry. So, there's all the little details from these real life cases end up in Hitchcock's films. And what I think is so great about that is that audiences of the time knew these cases, and so somehow when they're the details that they read about in the newspaper or are in Alfred Hitchcock's films, it gives it some more authenticity and creepiness. And so I love that about Hitchcock. There's some things we have to talk about when talking about Rear Window. First of all, the set. Alfred Hitchcock did not like shooting on location. Whenever possible, he would like to build a set and shoot in one place. It just made it easier. And the set for Rear Window is the largest set ever built for a movie up until that point. I think it's still Paramount Studios' largest set ever built. And let me give you some facts about it. There were, first of all, I'm going to give you the dimensions. It's almost 100 feet wide and 185 feet long, the depth, and then it was 40 feet high. Now, they did this inside a studio, but that's way more space than was actually there. So what Hitchcock did was had them jackhammer the concrete out of the floor, and they dug down. And so I think it was something like 30 feet were below ground level. And so he built these sets that could, from floor level is where Jeffries, the Jimmy Stewart character is, and everything that goes below is below ground where they excavated the concrete and the soil below it. So, the set had 31 apartments. I think almost all of them had electricity and running water. In fact, a lot of the actors ended up just staying in their apartments during the day. And Miss Torso, the actress who played Miss Torso, stayed in her apartment almost the entire time. She kind of lived there until they were ready and they said action, and then she started to perform. But because the apartments were functioning, she could keep food in the refrigerator and things like that. So, anyways, it was just this amazing set. There are some things too that I want you to know about. First of all, changing the lighting in a set like that would be incredibly difficult. But Hitchcock asked for there to be four basic lighting sets: daylight, morning, kind of the evening, kind of at sunset, dusk, and then at night. And they were able to go from night to day in less than 45 minutes. And I can't tell you how fast that is. But they were able to completely change the look, lighting wise, of the set, so they could go from one scene to the next with not a lot of time. The lights were old 2K 2000 watt lights, so they were incredibly hot, and the set got very, very hot when they were filming. The other thing I wanted you to know is that Hitchcock used all diegetic sound, with the exception of the opening and closing credits. Okay, diegetic sound, that's a term you're going to need to know. Diegetic sound means that everything emanates from within the frame. So the only music you hear is the composer up in the loft up above. And then when you see the cars going by, that's the sound you hear, characters speaking. So it's not a soundtrack or a musical score. It's all music and sounds that come from within the frame. So this film was entirely, with the exception of credits, diegetic sound. So be aware of that. The other thing I wanted you to know is that audiences of the time definitely knew that in addition to these real life murder stories, Hitchcock was using this love story that had been in the news. I'm sure you've heard of Ingrid Bergman, very famous actress, actually had acted for Hitchcock in some other films. But very, very famous. She had a relationship with a photographer named Robert Capa. And he, like Jeffries, needed to go to locations to shoot in war zones and things like that. And Ingrid Bergman was one of the biggest movie stars of all time. And so that was the tensions that Jeffries and Lisa felt were a lot like the real stories of Ingrid Bergman and Robert Capa. So all those things I think are particularly interesting and relevant to the film. Some things about Hitchcock. I don't know if you know this, but he made Raymond Burr, the actor who played Lars Thorwald, to look like the very famous David O. Selznick. And it's no secret that Hitchcock did not like David O. Selznick because he was too controlling, and Hitchcock wanted the freedom to do whatever he wanted in his movies. And so he made the villain look like David O. Selznick. So anyways, I thought that was interesting. By the way, Hitchcock was known for his sense of humor. Sometimes it was funny, but oftentimes it was kind of cruel. He would find out what people, his actors and crew members, were afraid of, and then take advantage of it. So there was one actress who worked for him who didn't like mice, and so he bought her a box of chocolate, and when she opened it, there were a bunch of live mice in it. Same thing he did, I think the same thing with a box of spiders, but he loved to play practical jokes, and I think his goal was to make himself laugh. And sometimes it would rub people the wrong way. but he had his favorite actors and actresses. And so, for example, Jimmy Stewart, classic American actor. Um, big films. The movie of his that I have to watch every year is It's a Wonderful Life. I watch it during the holiday season, but I think it's a masterpiece. He did a few Frank Capra films, um, but he did four films with Alfred Hitchcock. Rear Window's one of them, but he also did a movie called Rope, and I'll talk about Rope in a minute. Vertigo was considered to be, or Hitchcock considered to be, one of his all-time best films. He did The Man Who Knew Too Much and then Rear Window. So he used Jimmy Stewart over and over again. And then Grace Kelly actually was in three of his films. The first was To Catch a Thief, then Dial M for Murder, and then Rear Window. In fact, he liked Grace Kelly so much that he basically declared that he was never going to cast another actress, and then she retired. She only made 31 films. So, anyways, he had a thing for blonde actresses. Let me just give you a list of some of the ones I wrote down. In addition to Grace Kelly, I mentioned Ingrid Bergman, who was blonde, Janet Leigh, who was in Psycho, Kim Novak, who was in Vertigo, but Eva Marie Saint, Joan Fontaine, Tippi Hedren, who was in Birds, Vera Miles, and I mean, just so many others. I don't know if he liked them blonde, although his wife, who's a big part of his career, was not blonde. But I don't know, maybe he just like casting them. But the other thing about Hitchcock is that Alfred Hitchcock made a cameo in every one of his movies. You always see Hitchcock, and a cameo is just very brief. I was wondering if any of you noticed, those of you who've already seen the film, have noticed Hitchcock in this one. He was up in the musician's loft. At one point in the movie, he's winding a clock and he looks over at the camera. It's kind of from a distance and it's very brief, but that's his cameo. It was a very big deal because he was a very famous director, had his own television program called Hitchcock Presents, and people knew what he looked like. And they knew that he did these cameos, and so they looked for him, and it became kind of a big thing. In his later films, he kept putting himself earlier and earlier in the film because he started to think that it might be a distraction. But anyways, it was always really funny how in Psycho, the movie begins in Arizona, and so he's wearing a big cowboy hat. He thought that was funny. In North by Northwest, there's a scene which kind of real busy and everybody's running around in New York City, and he runs up to a bus and the door closes right in his face. And so, they were often very funny. The one that I thought was most interesting, though, is a film that he made called Vertigo. The entire film of Vertigo takes place. I'm sorry, not Vertigo. Lifeboat. The entire film of Lifeboat takes place on a lifeboat. There are 12 characters. A cruise liner has just gone down, and these people are on this lifeboat. And of the 12 people, Alfred Hitchcock is not one of the people. So how is he going to make his because the entire film's there, how's he going to make his cameo? Well, what Alfred Hitchcock did was, well, first of all, I don't know if you know this, but Alfred Hitchcock was from England. And with the success of his movies in England, he came to the United States and started directing movies here in Hollywood. But when he lived in England, he was a rather robust man. I think that he was approaching 500 pounds, so very, very large. When he got to the United States, the insurance companies didn't want to take a risk on him. They thought that he might keel over, have a heart attack or something because he was so out of shape and so overweight. So they insisted that he go on a diet, and he did. I think he lost half of his body weight. And at one point, he got down to 220 pounds. And he took a before and after picture And one of the characters is holding a newspaper, and in the newspaper is Alfred Hitchcock's before picture and his after picture, and it was a weight loss commercial or ad in the newspaper. And I thought that was a funny way to make a cameo. But that's something else I wanted to mention is that Alfred Hitchcock often made films in on sets that were small or uh, confined. 12 or Lifeboat is 12 people on a small little boat. Rear Window, it's all from Jeffrey's point of view in his apartment looking out. One of the masterpieces that he did, I thought, was a film called Rope. And Rope all takes place in one apartment. By the way, also starring Jimmy Stewart. The whole movie is 7 reels. So it's 7 takes that cut together as one. And it's all taking place in this one apartment as these 2 guys plan a murder and plan and execute and try to hide a murder. And it's amazing, but all again one location. Dial M for Murder, which was also um, uh, Grace Kelly film, was all takes place in one apartment. So very, very common for him. I think it meant that he could take a screenplay that had originally been a play and work it for a movie. So anyway, those are things about Alfred Hitchcock. Let's see. What else would I like to mention? Oh, the last thing I think is that Rear Window was there was a thing that Alfred Hitchcock did. Studios usually owned the movies, and what Alfred Hitchcock did with a lot of his money that he made because he was so popular is he bought 5 of his films and gave them to his daughter. They were the 5 Lost Hitchcocks, as they were called: Vertigo, The Man Who Knew Too Much, The Trouble with Harry, Rope, and Rear Window. And they were unavailable for many years. And after he died, his daughter released the films back to the public. And suddenly, they were all these masterpieces. I think Rear Window, Rope, Vertigo, are all considered to be among his best films. So anyways, those are that's enough about Hitchcock. Mysteries. What mysteries have you seen? Do you like the genre? I think that it's still going live. People like to be surprised. Movies that end with a twist are quite often very popular. The one issue is that in the old days, in the 50s and earlier, you could have a surprise ending and people would still be surprised as they came in. Now, with the internet and people talking online and things about stuff, that it's harder and harder to have a surprise ending. And I don't know if that means that the genre is going to go away. I hope not, because I really like that. M. Night Shyamalan had some great films, The Sixth Sense, and so many things, The Usual Suspects, even Star Wars, I Am Your Father, was a surprise, and I completely was shocked when I saw that in the theater for the first time. Um, I'm not sure if that's happening as much as it used to because it's harder to keep a secret. So, anyways, I'm curious to know what you think about the genre. Curious to know what you think about Alfred Hitchcock and Rear Window in particular. Let me know if you've seen any of his other films. So many amazing ones. A lot of people have seen Psycho. I teach that in another class, or The Birds, or North by Northwest. So let me know, and I hope you like the genre. And thanks.